So wonderful to be here. So moved by all the energy and all the passion and the excitement. There's so much emotion in the room and in the city today. It's almost overwhelming. As she said, my name's Sam Mallikarjunan. I work at a company called HubSpot, and I teach at a school you may have heard of called Harvard University. I want to talk today about the specific sort of mechanics behind how you build these big movements, how you build these startups, and the processes that we go through in order to make this work. Sometimes I get a little disappointed that I wasn't, frankly, I wasn't around, or I wasn't old enough in the 70s to have been around for the first computer revolution, the first startup revolution. Like I look at what Steve Jobs and everybody else did, and a little part of me says, I could have done that. Right? Like, it was okay. Like, we take a bunch of things and we package them together, we sell it as a single unit. It's so exciting. I get disappointed. I'm a little bit jealous about the time that they had. And it's easy to fall into that pattern of jealousy. Your jealousy might be about the time that somebody else had to launch a startup. It might be about the access to capital that they have. It might be about where they are in the market that they have to sell to. But the awesome thing about what we have is that the 70s and the 80s and the 90s did not have what we have today. They didn't have the global community of entrepreneurship. They didn't have the amazing transformation that we're going through right now. There's an old blessing/curse, right? May you live in interesting times. There was a group that lived in very interesting times. They were the dinosaurs. So we tend to make fun of dinosaurs, like it's an insult, right? Like, oh, that company's a dinosaur. I assure you that if any of us in this room had to actually fight a dinosaur, that we would lose. In their own time, in their own environment, the dinosaurs were the absolute apex predators. But the environment that they lived in changed. And that's what allowed organisms that were able to adapt and grow, thrive, and expand across the world. Right now, we're in another process of enormous change. We're in a mass extinction, not of species, but of businesses. So you've probably heard of the Fortune 500 index in the United States. It used to define who you were. You're a Fortune 500 company, you're a Fortune 500 CEO, it's who you were. The average lifespan of a company in the Fortune 500 used to be 75 years. Now that lifespan has declined to just about 15 years. Soon, we project that the lifespan of a company on the Fortune 500 will be 5 years. 5 years until a company that was a bedrock of the global economy is either off the list or possibly gone entirely. Now, when I speak to non-entrepreneurship conferences, when I speak to big companies, to companies on the Fortune 500, that's a really scary slide. You guys are excited about it, right? Because what does that mean? That means potential. Richard Foster at Yale expects that by 2020, 3/4 of the companies on the Fortune 500 will be companies we've never heard of. Quick survey, has anybody heard of HubSpot? Okay, that's scary, right? If you haven't heard of me, it's a really exciting time to be around. It's a bad time to be a big, slow company that has a hard time adapting. 375 slots on the Fortune 500 are up for grabs. You can be one of those companies. Never in history have you had that opportunity. Now, I know a lot of people in here talk about marketing. Obviously, HubSpot's mostly known for our marketing software. We're dealing with this change in additionally a period where we have a very large challenge in marketing. So every year, HubSpot does this survey that asks a simple question: who do you trust? And at the top, as you'd expect, are like firefighters and teachers and doctors. And a little bit further down, you have professional sports athletes and baristas. And then further down, you have politicians and lobbyists. And then below that, you have sales and marketing professionals. Now, this data is from 2016. I don't know how politics is everywhere else in the world, but for those of us in the sales and marketing profession, all due respect to the politicians and lobbyists, but we lost to those people. Come on. We have the dubious distinction of being the only profession that an entire industry sprung up to stop us from doing our jobs. Ad blockers, caller ID, all of this stuff was designed to stop sales and marketing people from being so annoying. We have to deal with this enormous challenge. And this has led to another interesting phenomenon. Research from Deloitte has talked about the decay of what we call knowledge stocks. Now again, you used to name your company after what you did, right? You were Standard Oil, you're General Electric. You named it after, because whatever you knew could carry you through decades of growth. Now, instead of decades and decades and decades, whatever you know, the value of what we call that knowledge stock, has also decayed to just about 5 years. You can't coast on what you know. You have to be in a continual mindset of learning and evolution and growth. I love this picture too, especially being here in Karachi. It's a beautiful picture, not just because Facebook has wonderful graphic artists, but it shows the connections between people in the world, right? And how the opportunities to work together have really exploded over the last 10 or 20 years. In the United States, has anybody heard of the actor Kevin Bacon? Yeah, okay. We play this game called 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon to see how far away you are from the actor Kevin Bacon. You are now all within 6 degrees because you know me. I went to high school with this guy on the left, who was in the movie Rosewood with Ving Rhames, who was in the movie Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise, who was in the movie Top Gun with our friend Kevin Bacon. And this is impressive, right? We're only 6 degrees away from this famous actor that we all respect. It's not really that impressive anymore. So Facebook looks at this data to see how far away you are from any given person on the planet. And instead of 6 degrees of separation, which is what we've always thought, 3.57 degrees is the average separation between any two people on the planet. We are more connected than we have ever been in history, which is first of all terrifying, right? Because to be honest, growing up in Tampa, living in Boston, I never used to have to worry about competing with people in Pakistan, right? Like I had to worry about people in Tampa, I had to worry about people in Boston. Now I'm competing with every single person everywhere in the world, every minute of every day. It's thrilling. It's exhausting, but it's thrilling. It's a great time to be in business. So I want to talk about how you can survive this in the frameworks that we use. You may have seen this curve before. This is the Rogers Market Segments bell curve of adoption. On the far left, you've got sort of the innovators and early adopters. Like if you have a mobile app, I'll download it just to see if it breaks my phone, because knowing how you broke my phone is a useful piece of information for me. That does not make me product market fit. Right? Like you don't want to like spend your career selling to me. And then on the very far right, you've got laggards, people like my mother who just switched off of dial-up internet. Right? So in the US, by the way, 20 million people still pay for dial-up internet. You don't want to build your business selling to those people either. Right? But it used to be this nice smooth curve of sort of technology adoption. Now the world that we're living in, though, is instead of this nice smooth curve, we have this really rapid curve, where in a very short period you have trial users. And then, of an even shorter period of time, you've got the vast majority of the users that you're ever going to have. And this has broken a lot of what we consider innovation strategy. Because it's meant that you can't wait for that. You can't just rest on the fact that you have market domination and just enjoy that. Companies that have been around 100 years are going out of business. They've defined their categories. So instead of S-curves, instead of bell curves, in your mind, I want you to chop off the bell curve. We now live in a world of S-curves. Continuous improvement, continuous evolution. Once you reach that growth plateau, it's time to start thinking about how you can disrupt yourself. That is the most terrifying challenge that we have in large businesses today. We split this up into 4 phases. So the first phase is finding product market fit. Product market fit is relatively straightforward. Can you build something that people will use, that they'll find value from? The second phase is getting the math to work, right? So as an investor, can I give you $3, right, and you bring a $9 customer in, right? So you have a 1-to-3 ratio. The third phase is, can you get the math to scale? I don't actually want to give you $3 and get $9 back. I want to give you $3 million and get $9 million back, or $30 million and get $90 million back. Can you get that to scale? And then the fourth phase of this, because in our minds, there's no more bell curve, we only live in S-curves. In the fourth phase of this, you're starting to see saturation and disruption, and you focus on what's next, creating the disruption that you're afraid of. So the first part of this is finding product market fit. Before you begin any of this, you should think about, where do I want to be in this quadrant, right? So on the y-axis here, you have things that are good for the world, and then on the x-axis, you have things that are good for you. The worst case scenario is it's both bad for the world and bad for you, right? Don't do that. Good for the world, bad for you. Gray area, right? There's some very selfless people in the world who do that sort of thing. Good for you, bad for the world. Okay, we'll again call that the gray area. But there are companies that fall into that. That's fine. And then good for you and good for the world is the dream. Right? This is the dream that we had at HubSpot, which is we thought that marketers and salespeople should be able to be more trustworthy than politicians and lobbyists. And so we had this idea of inbound marketing. It was good for us. We built a large business, but it was also good for the world. And this has been our sort of guiding star in avoiding things that are bad for the world, that might make us some money. Right? Like, so power dialers and some of this other stuff that help you spam at scale, you can make some money on that, but we've decided that we didn't want to do that. We stick to that quadrant. And I'm not saying you have to be good for the world and good for you, but you have to pick and define where you're going to be. The next step is define the user assumption. As we're doing our office hours, my first question to you is always going to be, tell me about your customer. I don't care about your idea. Tell me about your customer. How well do you understand them? What are the challenges and problems that they solve? In software engineering, we usually use what we call a user story, and it follows this format. As an X, I want to Y so that I can Z. Right? So as a speaker on stage who's running a little bit behind his time hack, I want a thing in front of me that reminds me that I'm running out of time so that I can accelerate my speech and not spend so much time with dramatic pauses. So make sure that you're defining this user assumption that you're doing. Another framework we use is called the jobs to be done. Henry Ford has one of the most famous quotes on this. If there's any Harry Potter fans in here, you'll recognize this guy. But I've been all over the world. I've never found anybody who collects a quarter-inch drill bit, right? We want a quarter-inch hole. It's the thing that we're trying to accomplish with this. Henry Ford's most famous quote, if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. Obviously, he did not found the Henry Ford Family Horse Breeding Corporation. It's the Henry Ford Motor Company, because they understood that the job to be done was not buying a car. It was to get from point A to point B as quickly, as safely, as cost-effectively as possible. Ford, to this day, is reorganizing itself as a mobility company. They're not a car company. They're not an automotive company. They're focusing on this job to be done. That's a hard thing to define, but the better you do that, the better you can create disruption in your markets. So we have disrupt in the title of this event. Disruption is a pet peeve of mine. The term is often used very wrong, very incorrectly. If McDonald's has a $90 menu and you roll out a 99-cent menu, that is not disruption. Right? That's price competition, which is fine. There's plenty of business models based on, I used to be CMO of a company called cheaphumidors.com. We sold humidors cheaply. Like, that's fine. You can build a big business just by being cheaper. But disruption is a really interesting thing, right? Because it follows human nature. As our companies grow, we have this tendency to follow up the performance curve, right? And build more valuable customers and sell more expensive units of whatever we're doing, create more and more features to deliver value. And it creates this gap between what most of the people in the world need and what we want to sell as companies as we grow. And it's inevitable. Everybody feels themselves pulled up this curve as you grow. I was talking to somebody yesterday who has at the Nest who has an e-commerce application, and we were talking about should they go to the United States and compete for people who are already paying Magento and Shopify, or should they stay here in Karachi and sell to people who are just launching e-commerce businesses for the first time? One of the core features of disruptive innovation is that disruption usually starts at the low end of the market. Uber didn't become the company they are today by giving rides to the rich and famous. Google didn't become the company they are today by selling to IBM. They started by bringing in people who weren't participating. And when I talk about jealousy, again, you might look at the other markets and say they have so much money, they're so mature, it's so easy to sell to them. We're not here to do those things that are easy. We're here to disrupt. Something else that I want you to think about when you're finding product market fit, this is, when I say patents, everybody in the room immediately gets tired. I promise it's more interesting than it sounds. We don't spend a lot of time thinking about why our governments do the things they do sometimes. But you think about why, post-Enlightenment, did the government come up with an idea that said you can own an idea, you can own a concept. It's not because they wanted to protect us from somebody copying our idea. They didn't care about that. It's because we're giving you a temporary monopoly on this idea, and in exchange, you have to tell everybody exactly how you did it. It prevents you from keeping all that information to yourself. So Thomas Jefferson, when he was rolling this out in the United States, talked about how amazed he was at how just getting everybody to tell you how they made their invention spurred even more invention. This is an artist rendering, by the way, of my grandfather and all of the stuff that he invented. He invented, for example, a thing that shreds cars, right? It's a machine that does that. And it's used in all kinds of stuff now. Those patents are cited in all kinds of future things. People have built on those ideas. You can do the same thing. You can go look at the various patents all around the world. Some of them are old. Some of them have never been used. Some of them were patented before they were really economically feasible, but now we have the opportunity to build that. All of this wealth of knowledge is surrounding us in the world, and we have to learn how to use it. This is what our software looks like, by the way. It's not as beautiful as the artist rendering. But you can see this fan effect when you have a great invention, when you have a disruptive innovation of something and the impact that it can have on all these other inventions. All these purple lines are things that are related to that original invention. You can see that impact. You may have heard of blue ocean strategy. It's another thing to think about when you're creating your strategy for where do I want to compete. You have the red ocean, it's full of blood, right? It's very, very competitive. And then you've got the blue ocean, where there's not that many people competing to do those jobs to be done, to serve that particular process. My favorite example of this is actually Pokemon Go. Does anybody, raise your hand, anybody play Pokemon Go? All right, I like you people. You're all nerds. That's fun. So Pokemon was really, really interesting because, they've had Pokemon games, they've had Pokemon, examples for a really long time. But instead of building a virtual, headset like Oculus or something like that, they used the phone, they used, the existing technology, and they looked at the canvas and they said, like, okay, we don't have the best story. Like the Pokemon Go story, no one knows. Like there's weird characters in there that we've never heard of before. But they have this stuff, that, like the immersiveness of it, what's more immersive than the world you live in, and also the community of it. I've never played a game where I had such a feeling of community with the people around me. I was going to parks at 2 o'clock in the morning in Boston, and there was 100 people because Pikachu. And somebody tweeted out that there was a Pikachu. And so 100 people showed up, and we started meeting each other and talking and appreciating each other. And this was the engine of growth behind Pokemon Go. The fastest game in history to ever reach 50 million users, the fastest game in history to ever make $1 billion in revenue. Phase 2 is getting the math to work. Okay, so it's nice. Now you've got this thing that people want to use. The next question we have is, can you grow? Can you put $1 into the engine and then get $1 out? Pokemon Go, we tend to look at this chart, and because marketers are horrible people, we all like to write about how everything is horrible. So like Pokemon Go is dying, or all the new articles, right? We look at this chart, it's the daily active user chart for Pokemon as it's sort of declined over time. And we get depressed, right? We're very hard on them, being like, oh, it was never a thing. It was never going to be useful. This is sort of interesting, but there was a lot of hype in the launch of Pokemon Go. What they really care about is, with product market fit, it does not have to be interesting to everyone. Just like your marketing does not have to be universally interesting to everyone. It has to be interesting to some people. So my favorite definition of this is from Alex Schultz at Facebook. How do you know when you found product market fit? It's when your user retention is asymptotic to the x-axis. What that means is that as you acquire groups of people, some of them stick around forever. They stick around a really long time. This is how you build a big, wonderful business that makes a dent in the universe. Product A and Product B here both acquired the same number of customers at the same time. Product B, eventually, nobody was still paying them. They lost all the leverage in their model. Product A, people stick around and they have this product market fit. So just because not everybody in this room is still playing Pokemon Go does not mean that Pokemon Go, again, $1 billion single-handedly turned around Nintendo's revenue, even though Nintendo didn't own all of them. And this matters because this matters for growth. As an investor, if I'm looking at whether or not you have retention, whether or not people stick around, these two charts look the same in the beginning, right? Like we're getting 10,000 new people a month signing up for our app or buying our product or whatever. But if you're not good at keeping customers around, eventually you reach this plateau where you can no longer grow. If you're good at keeping them around, you have the beautiful stacking effect where you can make a real dent in the universe. If you take one thing away from the talk that I'm giving you today, I want it to be this, which is that if you're really good at keeping customers, you can spend more money to get customers. This is how we build leverage in the model. You have to plan for what you're going to do once you have sort of that level of success that comes through. I'm going to skip this slide. All right, step three is how do we get the math to scale? So you think of your business as sort of this magic box, right? Like you put $1 into this magic box, your magic box does magic box business model-y sorts of things, and then it spits out revenue on the other side. We abbreviate this with COCA. This is actually slides from my class at Harvard, by the way, so forgive the acronyms. But COCA is the cost of customer acquisition. You put it into a business model, and then you get some customer lifetime value, or CLTV, out. Put $1 in, get $2 out. Nice business. You can put $2 in and get $4 out. It's actually the same business. 1 to 2, 2 to 4, but it can grow faster, right? Or you can put $2 in and get $12 out. It's a more profitable business model. I still remember, though, the first time I was talking to one of our executives at HubSpot, I was so proud. I'm like, our ratio here in my unit that I was managing is like 1 to 9, right? That's great. I'm putting $1 in, we're getting $9 out. And his answer to me was, why are you growing so slowly? Because that doesn't necessarily, like getting the most margin out of it isn't necessarily what matters if you're really good at keeping those customers around. My favorite case study of this is Starbucks. You can insert here whatever your favorite coffee shop is. Starbucks has an average customer lifetime value in the United States of more than $14,000. The average Starbucks customer will spend $14,000. So walking around Manhattan once, I counted more than 90 Starbucksies. I don't know what the plural of Starbucks is. But I counted 90 different Starbucks stores. And they have great Wi-Fi. They've got wonderful couches, beautiful leather couches. The reason they're able to spend so much money creating this great experience is not because they're trying to spend $2 to sell $6 worth of coffee and food. It's because they're trying to spend $2,000 or $3,000, maybe $5,000 to acquire and retain a $14,000 customer. And obviously we know this changes. So I redid this math for HubSpot employees. We're worth over $30,000 in customer lifetime value. I don't run strategy at Starbucks, but it would be worth it for them to park a barista in our front office and just serve us coffee. Because we drink lots and lots of coffee and we have lots of meetings there. So marketing is half the customer acquisition equation, right? We used to think of marketing as sort of sitting in the corner playing with crayons, like it wasn't a very respected profession. Marketing is now half the customer acquisition equation. We work with sales to grow the businesses. We get traffic to our website, we turn some of those that traffic into leads, we turn some of those leads into customers, and that feeds that cost of customer acquisition that we have. But instead of starting with how many website visitors do I have and everything else, I want you to flip that funnel that you may have seen. Start with your customer lifetime value that you have in phase 1, right? Because you figured out your product market fit. Can I build something that people want to use? Can I build something that people will pay me money for? And then work your way back. If you have a customer lifetime value of $1,200 and you want to have a ratio of 1 to 3, that's easy math. You can spend $400 to acquire that customer. It doesn't matter whether that number seems high to you or low. It's just the math behind it. If you turn 10% of your leads into customers, that means you can spend $40 to get a lead. If you turn 5% of your visits into leads, you can spend $2 driving a visit to your website. As an investor, even if you don't know this, this is the math that I want to see that you understand. When I'm asking you about your customer, right, you should have a guess, a hypothesis. What's my customer's lifetime value? And then how much can I pour into my growth engine to acquire that customer between sales and marketing? So inbound marketing is the movement that we created at HubSpot that was both good for the world, we thought, and good for our business. It was this idea that instead of interrupting people, that we would create these experiences that attracted people to our websites and use that to power growth. The interest has grown in inbound marketing. This is the chart of just Google Trends that shows the interest in inbound marketing over time. That's interesting, right? More people know about us than used to. That's kind of interesting. But my favorite graph is actually this one. It's the comparison between inbound marketing and cold calling. So cold calling is when you bother people at home while they're eating dinner. Has anybody received a cold call that they absolutely loved? They really enjoyed? Yeah, no, it sucks. It's annoying. It's obnoxious, and it makes us less popular than lobbyists. But over time, when I talk about making a dent in the universe, it was a long, hard struggle. But in November of 2015, the concept of inbound marketing, of bringing people to your website, passed that of cold calling and what people were searching for in the universe. This is the most pride-inducing graph that I have seen personally in the last few years, because we've managed to take something that was really annoying, and we've managed to create something else and sell the idea to the marketplace. So we did this by cold calling. We actually invented an enemy. We invented this thing called outbound marketing. That wasn't a thing, it was just called marketing, right? Like we were all terrible at it, but it was just called marketing. We invented this enemy called outbound marketing, and we focused on how do we juxtapose ourselves against that. A lot of you, I've given the advice of you're trying to create these movements. Movements, it's nice to have an opposition. If you can show what you're not, it's easier for people to understand what you are. It's easier for me to explain what inbound marketing is by explaining what outbound marketing is, right? And then by telling you the other ways that we work against that. So by thinking about what is it that we're not, and then how can we use that to define our own dent in the universe? Our wonderful characters is inbound marketing beats that. I will make one confession to you all here. One of the reasons that we were thinking about inbound marketing back in 2006 was because ranking for the term internet marketing was very, very hard, right? And so instead of competing to rank for the term internet marketing, we invented the term inbound marketing, and we've actually, over the last 10 years, really closed the gap between the number of people who are interested in internet marketing and people who are interested in inbound marketing. It may seem like you're pigeonholing yourself by creating this sort of dichotomy between you and another movement or another concept, but you're not. You're creating a clarity that facilitates growth. This is a picture of my dad. I just wanted to toss him in here. All right, step 3, getting the math to scale. How do I give you money and you grow it over time? I love this particular case study. Somebody in the 1980s did a case study of IBM. And they figured out that it would take 9 months to ship an empty box. Based on the processes that they had from one of their engineers, they thought about this. 9 months to ship an empty box. And yet, 1 year after this particular quote was referring to, IBM launched the IBM PC. They managed to create this internal disruption. IBM obviously is still around. This is the company whose founder had the great quote of, I think there's a market for like 5 or 6 computers. And now they're obviously one of the largest computer manufacturers in the world. By the way, the power of the internet, I Googled dinosaur wearing rocket skates, and this showed up. So it shows you the power of diversity. Somebody somewhere in the world, they get you. They know what you're talking about. That's what was so impressive about this. Okay, so start with your customer and work your way back. I'm going to keep beating that into your head as we do our office hours, as we talk more. Your first job is not actually growth. Your first job is defining the customer, defining their problems, defining that job to be done, and then defining the monetization. Like how am I going to grow the lifetime value of this particular customer? And it builds this enormous leverage, right? So the interesting thing about customer-centric companies, if you're Starbucks, for example, you're not trying to spend 5 cents on PPC to get a $2 customer to sell a $6 cup of coffee and food. What you're trying to do is spend that $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. Most companies are like this yellow curve, right? You make a little bit of profit on the first transaction, and then you spam your entire list 3 times a week with a coupon, and you call that email marketing. Really good companies focus on that customer retention. If I'm good at keeping customers, I can spend more money to get customers. Of course, the danger with this being, if you spend more money to get customers and you're really bad at keeping customers, you lose money really, really quickly. I will confess that I was the worst offender of this. If you ever go to the United States, if you go to a mall, you might be harassed by people trying to sell you cell phones. Has anybody ever experienced those people? Yeah. I used to train those people. I was the epitome of obnoxious sales and marketing. I could do the pitch in Spanish. I don't actually speak Spanish. But I could do the pitch in Spanish. Ven acá, un minuto, ¿con quién es su teléfono celular? The reason I could do that is because as a salesperson, I didn't care what you said to me next, right? I was going to keep going with my pitch, and you were either going to buy or you were going to leave. It was an obnoxious way to do marketing, but it's what we had. It's what we worked with. The better way to do marketing is to bring people in and focus on educating them. So I like this screenshot from Amazon. This is an actual screenshot from my inbox. Amazon emails me about 3 to 5 times a day. It's really kind of annoying. I want to introduce you to 2 people very important to me. These are my grandparents. Wonderful, fascinating people. They don't email me 3 to 5 times a day. If you're emailing me more than my grandparents, you'd better have something really interesting to say. And it's not because Amazon doesn't want to do this. I'm actually a big fan of Amazon, even though I'm critical of them. Jeff Bezos has this great quote about why they allow negative reviews on their website. And it's because their obsession is not... When they put negative reviews on their website, his investors say, obviously you don't know how to run a business. You make money when you sell things. And Bezos said, that's not true. We don't make money when we sell things. We make money when we help people make purchase decisions. And this is the opportunity that Amazon still has, right? So in here are signals. They're indicators to Amazon about what's my job to be done. Any good golf players in here? Okay, I'm awful at golf, so we can all go play golf then. But I wanted to play with my in-laws. And so I was searching for like swing trainers and stuff like that. My job to be done is not actually playing golf. I don't care about golf. My job to be done is I want to spend more time with my mother-in-law and my father-in-law who play golf. Right? When you understand that, not only can you sell to me better, but you're much better at keeping me around. All right. There's a great quote that I want to leave with you on. The hardest part of disruption is focus. When you're doing a startup, you have all these ideas. There's so much energy in the room right now. There's so much energy in this country. There's so much energy in this region. And you may feel like you have to go do all the interesting things at once. The hardest challenge of innovation and entrepreneurship is not actually the interesting idea. There's lots of interesting ideas. It's focus. If you've got $2 billion opportunities, the right answer is not do each at 80%, right? Because somebody will beat you. It's focus on one entirely. He who chases two rabbits catches neither. Okay. I want to thank you guys for having me here today as they put this up behind me. And I want to leave you with, they're not kidding with the time's up thing. It's like yelling at me right now. But I want to leave you with this thought. There's all these frameworks that exist. There's these methods to understand the mechanics of how you build and design your businesses. But the thing I want to leave you with, you can search for all that. You can buy the book on it, whatever. You can figure all that out. What you need to do is believe that this is now the most interesting period in the entire history of commerce. Every single person in this room has more power than the most powerful leader 1,000 years ago to drive change globally and to make an impact that you want to have, to make that dent on the universe, to grow that business. Don't be discouraged by your failures. Don't be discouraged by maybe your lack of access to capital. It will find you. You will grow that business and you will make that dent in the universe. Thank you guys very much.